go do that. I always think it's helpful for me to remember who it is that we are. We have described ourselves as a quirky ragtag group of folks trying to follow Jesus. And that's just who we are. But as followers of Jesus, we have a specific set of resources for dealing with life. Right? That there's many different ways that we take to think about the world around us and to try to figure out how to move forward, to try to deal with the stuff that life throws at us. And we as followers of Jesus have the life and teachings of Jesus also to follow. And we recognize that it's complicated, right? Because we are trying to follow the life and teachings of a Galilean rabbi. And so I've dedicated my life to following this Galilean rabbi, but I have in no way become a Galilean rabbi. And so we're trying to take these teachings and translate them across time, across culture, across so many boundaries, and trying to figure out what that means. And we recognize also that it's not a set of rules to follow, that it's not like, well, if you do these 10 things and somehow, right, you go to heaven or whatever, you sort of see as the goal here. And yeah, we even have to define that. But even as it's very complicated, it's once in a while, it's helpful to remember that it's not all very complicated. So for example, if one of you said something bad about the other, and the other person would respond by physically trying to attack that person, we'd go, no, that's wrong. Overt violence for the sake of revenge is wrong. And we as followers of Jesus try to follow that and believe that to be true both personally and socially, and also nationally, right? And that's in so many ways, that third step, right, is the tricky one. It's not tricky so much as it's unusual, right? Because 20 years ago, right, 9/11 happened, and let's face it, most of us probably knew right after it happened that somewhere around the world, a lot of people were going to die from our revenge. And we stopped counting after a while. So some people say 300,000, and some people say 500,000, and some people say 1 million plus. Who knows how many? We don't even want to think about that, right? So we've left behind an eye for an eye and a tooth for a tooth and a life for a life, and gone to 100 to 1 or 500 to 1 or whatever it is. And it happened not just, right, 20 years ago after 9/11 and the 20 years since, but a few weeks ago, there was a bombing at the Kabul airport. And right, the moment that happened, the president came on television and assured us that yes, someone was going to die. Lots of someones were going to die from that. And that's right. And it happened. Which tells us how low the bar is for, right, being a radical in our society. To be a radical is simply to say that overt violence for the sake of revenge is wrong. That's still a very radical thing to say. So we need to regularly remind ourselves, even us, we need to remind ourselves of the call of Jesus on our lives. That part of this is just to say simply, right, this is wrong. And this wasn't always an unusual position, even inside the church. It's always been an unusual position in society. But it currently, right, today in the United States, the fact that we say that makes us unusual as a church. And it's worth understanding the history of this. The first 350 odd years of the church's history, right, from Jesus to Constantine, overt violence for the sake of revenge was simply flat out wrong. But even after Constantine, even after, right, 360, when the Roman Empire became sort of nominally Christian, it was still wrong, right, to be part of overt violence for the sake of revenge or anything. That while soldiers did go to war, the assumption was that yes, but when you came back, you did penance. When you came back, you had to ask forgiveness for the things that you did. And then something changed, right? This happened roughly in the latter part of the 11th century. So 1096 is a rough date for this. And the Pope's name was Urban II. And you think, well, okay, there's a pope and he has a name, but this was one of those odd times when there was more than one pope. So this wasn't actually the pope in Rome. This was the pope south of Rome, but he wanted to be the pope in Rome. And so one of the things he did to bolster his own reputation and his own political power is to institute the very first crusade. And this is not, of course, like Billy Graham or anything like that. This is literal soldiers going out and slaughtering people. And Urban said that not only will God forgive you for the killing that happens on the crusade, but God, in fact, will forgive other sins that you have committed if you go out on this crusade and attempt to free Jerusalem from the bad guys. Right? And in fact, Urban said that you will be forgiven for other sins even when you kill other Christians. Because there were many Christians, right, living along the way who got slaughtered, and many Christians at that point living in Jerusalem, right, in basic peace and security in Muslim lands, and they also, right, were just part of the general slaughter. So this is why we read the Gospels, right? And today we even read Romans because it's there. All you have to do is read it. We understand that these passages apply to our personal selves and our political selves. It is not okay for us to do this individually. It is not okay for the country to do this on our behalf. Yeah, okay, but still it's complicated, right? The news media does a lot of work to try to make all of this violence somehow acceptable, right? Save the Afghan women. They pull on our heartstrings to talk about all the children that we're saving around the world. And we continue to be involved. We're starting to get involved now because of refugees. Even though we didn't create the refugees and we tried to minimize the number of refugees that there were, we still are kind of trying to do our part to clean up some of the mess that other people created. And we live in this really odd state that says it's okay for our soldiers to go out there and kill people, but we are not willing to accept the refugees we create when we go out and do that. It's sort of Jesus exactly backwards. And it's also important to remember that something has changed. I'm not the only person to notice this, obviously, right? Because 9/11 was this time of great national unity, right? That the country came together to mourn, to recognize the horrible thing that happened, the death of all of those people. And clearly now the end of the war is not a time of great national unity. Right now, division is much more important. Part of the reason is because there are many people who gain personal or social or political or economic power from division. And so we have to despise whatever it is the other side does. And it's true on both sides. So one group watches Fox and the other group watches MSNBC or listens to NPR to get the talking points for a discussion that doesn't happen. And both sides say to themselves, how can they be so stupid? This is one of the reasons I like volunteering with Pantry Plus more, because there are no sides there. I have no idea about the political affiliation of most of the folks around me when we go there. I know some of them, but, right? And I certainly don't know anything about the people we deliver food to, except that they are hungry. And that's all I need to know. Yes, it is more complicated than that, but not much. So this is our ongoing challenge at Morgantown Church of the Brethren and Cistern and Othering. As we navigate the complexities of life, we need to have this background voice in our heads going, and Jesus. So we watch the news and Jesus. And we listen to the science and Jesus. And we focus on spirituality and Jesus. And we check out our Facebook status and Jesus. And then we listen to NPR and Jesus. And it's not simple, but it's also never finished. We're never going to get to the place and Jesus isn't going to be important. So that's the challenge that, well, unfortunately isn't the challenge for the week. It's the challenge for like the rest of our lives and Jesus, because it's not over, right? So our final song talks about that. The final song is called the Battle is Over, but the War Goes On. And that's true in so many different ways, in so many different places, right? For our country, Afghanistan is over, sort of, but the war on terror goes on. Armed shipments continue. Right? Those of us working for peace, well, one less war to worry about, but we're still in Iraq and Somalia and Syria, and it goes on and on and on. Locally, the same is true, right? I don't even know if the battle is over for COVID, and the war is going to go on even after that. Right? So this last song is not something you have words for. You'll probably figure out the chorus, but otherwise, just enjoy it. It's one of the advantages of doing Zoom. Battle is over, the war goes on.